Okay, I think we are absolutely live now. So welcome everybody to the Feel Inspired podcast. There's always a bit of a sort of a technology lag, so we have to be sure that we're actually live first before we say anything. But I just wanted to say welcome. For those who know me, I'm Amit Sodha. For those who don't, I'm Amit Sodha. And this is the Feel Inspired podcast. And it's been a few weeks since I've been live, but I've had a few guests, unfortunately, sadly drop out. But I've got a nice lineup over the next couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. And today's guest is no exception. She's an incredible human being, and we do a little bit of work together. We've only just recently become acquainted, but I've been, really sort of, not impressed is the word, but just enamored by the work. And so I wanted to bring this beautiful soul on today. But if you're watching live right now and you can't stay for the whole thing, do not worry, you can watch the replay later. The podcast will be live on all major podcast platforms shortly after the video's gone out. And I will include all the links as well, so that if you have any questions or you want to connect with today's guest, you are more than welcome to. And so on that note, I would like to welcome this incredible individual. Her name is Su Patel, and she's written a book called Putting the Human Back into HR. But she's done a number of other things. So I'm going to let her give her initially give her introduction about her story, who she is, how she's got to this point today from where she was before. And then we'll kind of do a deep dive into her story and her philosophy on life. So firstly, welcome, Sue. I'm the only one giving you applause, but there will be more people, don't worry, eventually. So
amazing. Thank you so much, firstly, Amit, for having me on your show. And also thank you for the beautiful introduction. And I was just saying to Amit earlier, for those of you that are listening, is that Amit and I have kind of seen each other in passing on groups, on social media groups or on WhatsApp groups and stuff, but we haven't actually ever really had a proper conversation.
Yeah,
and this is our first proper conversation, and we've just been kind of checking each other out, what each other's up to, and the universe has kind of brought us together as it does with beautiful souls.
Are you checking me out?
Yeah, I'm following you and your beautiful wife. But it's just a real honor to be sharing this space with you today, and thank you so much for having me. So
it's beautiful to have you.
Amazing. So as you said, just to give you the listeners a little bit of an introduction into me. So I've been in HR for 25 plus years, right? I know I don't look old enough, right? I did start when I was like 2. But yeah, I've been in HR for well over 25 years, and I really just love working with people. I have a natural way of being with people, and I found that way of being at the age of 18 when I first became a line manager for Tesco. But my journey, I worked for Tesco for over 27 years. I was made redundant in 2016, and I set up my own company as a HR consultant, helping small to medium businesses with my experience from Tesco. And then I soon realized that it was pretty much more the same of what I've always been doing, and that actually, I've got skills that can empower and help more people. And I wanted to help HR professionals. I encountered quite a few HR professionals who weren't feeling very confident in their roles, and although they've got the qualification, they weren't feeling very empowered in the decisions they could make and in their leadership. So what I do now is I coach and mentor HR professionals, because I think often coaching isn't enough for people, and having been there and done it, as we were sharing earlier, with my experience, I'm able to mentor them as well as coach them. So one of the reasons why I do mentor people as well is that with HR, predominantly, one of the areas that we struggle with is credibility. As a HR professional, you're trying to find the balance between, listening to what staff and employees want, and then also do what the business wants from you as well. Like, you're paid by the business, but actually you're in the job because you care about people. So how do you balance the two? So, and then you kind of end up being in a place where the staff feel like you're not there listening to them or supporting them, and the directors feel like you're too soft. So what do you do, So I really work with HR professionals, like with my clients, to really just find a balance that works for them and build their confidence to really step into their leadership. So that's what I do predominantly. I'm also the director of the HR Networking Club, where we provide a space for a group of HR professionals to come together in their local areas when we're not in lockdown, to kind of network and also learn from each other. So yeah, and as you said, I published my book in 2018 called Putting the Human Back into HR. And like I said, HR has, not always had a great reputation. We're often reeling off policies and processes and the law and what you can't do. And, the job has become all about what the book says, rather than about really connecting to human beings in the workplace, really leading with, love and, compassion in the workplace. So for me, the book is pretty much about, as a HR professional, how can you do that? How can you bring that? Because you're not just an employee in an organization. Although you're paid by the company and you are an employee, you're much more than that, because you're responsible for the culture, the well-being of everyone in that organization. So you kind of got to step up into your leadership, even as an employee.
And especially at this time right now, it's even more crucial, because with everything going on, I'm sure that there's going to be people who are going to be reaching out to the HR resources even more so now, with all the stress, the anxiety, the returning, the challenges, perhaps people being laid off, people being made to take on more responsibility, and so many changes happening at an incredible pace as well. I bet you've got your work cut out for you right now.
Actually, I've been really blessed, because I don't really do much of the consulting now, so I'm not really involved as much in HR. But what I have, got more involved in is supporting those HR professionals with the workload that they're dealing with. There's so much, yes, there's lots of overwhelm, anxiety, and uncertainty for employees in organizations, and HR is predominantly having to take care of everyone from the directors to the employees, managing remotely, helping the managers manage remotely, keeping on top of performance, keeping on top of, well-being of people, that often many HR professionals out there are not taking care of themselves, are feeling overwhelmed themselves, and, who do they go to? So in that sense, yes, my work is a little bit cut out for me, but I love it, like that's who I am for HR professionals is, I am that kind of that leader, someone who provides them with a space of being able to rant without being judged, and also to just have their back in that, the decisions that they are making are the right ones, and just trust yourself. And it's just great to be able to provide that, especially at a time like this.
Absolutely. And I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Apologies if anyone's listening and hearing that, but once I start talking, it seems to go. But we kind of came up with the topic title for today called Leading with Love. So I want you to tell everyone what it means to lead with love. Where did you come up with that idea? What does that mean to you? What is that all about?
Yeah, so a couple of things really. So, as I was starting off in my career, like, as a young manager in Tesco, I was going up the ranks. I encountered a store manager that I was working with at the time. And, I was very conscientious. I worked my way up from a cashier to a line manager, and then done various line manager roles to really build my experience in managing people. And then I became a trainee as a senior line manager at the time. And I remember, being, trying to get in the morning to make sure all the standards and the presentation was right, and really being conscientious. I learned from some really amazing store managers with some really high standards and attention to detail. And you kind of need to be like that when you're in retail, so that, you can really serve the customers with the standards that, to make them come back, right? And I remember getting in early one morning, and we started a walk around, myself and the night manager, with the store manager, and he was not in a good mood. And it wasn't a surprise that he wasn't in a good mood, because often he would come in being quite grumpy, and it all depending on whether his football team won or not. But that's what we kind of made it out to be. We don't really know the real reason. But we was on the walk around, and he was like, "What's that?" And we're like, "What's what?" And he was like, "There's a shelf edge label missing." And, you know, when you're doing the walk around in the morning, you know, we're writing down a snagging list of things that, you know, we can, because we're not going to pick up everything. Sometimes you know, as a team, you're picking up on stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I said, it's all right, you know, I'll get that sorted as soon as we're done. And he was like, no, he said, are you stupid? No, he said, are you effing stupid? Right? So myself and the night manager were there, and I was like, oh my God. And because I myself at the time wasn't very self-confident, or, you know, I was like, I wanted to get on. I was a trainee manager. I was shocked, like, with what he just said to me. But what I did know was it was very humiliating that he was speaking to me that way. And then later on, you know, we were just having a conversation, and because I was a trainee manager, he kind of said, you know, as you'll learn in your role that there are times when you can speak to people like that and times when you can't speak to people like that. He said, you just got to know when you can. And I was just thinking at the time, like, there is no way that I'll be speaking to anybody like that, you know. Yeah. And I kind of went into HR because, you know, I wanted to be a voice for people. You know, I wanted to provide. We spend like pretty much most of our waking life at work, you know, and for me, it's really important to create a safe space for people to provide a service, you know, not just for customers, but for the company that they work with, you know, and the people that they work with.
Yeah.
So for me, you know, going into HR was pretty much about that, is, you know, how can I be a voice for people? How can I be someone who's a real stand for people, that they don't get spoken to that way? And I was always very driven to, I think, you know, I just had a natural ability to work with people and find a way of motivating and developing people. Like, that is one of the best things that I loved about my job, is really developing. I don't know how, you know, I've developed, I can't even count how many, like hundreds of thousands of people who I've helped develop from, you know, being a general assistant to going into a line manager role, or line managers who want to become senior managers, you know, and I've really played a big part in so many people's lives so that they can go and create a better future for themselves and their families. You know, people that I worked with over 20 years, you know, contact me sometimes and reminisce on the fact that, you know, after an intervention with me, they were able to then take their life to the next level. And it's such a great, you know, like, that feeling when you can really do that for somebody is so magical. So magical and satisfying and rewarding, like all of those things. And you know, like, that's, for me, leading with love is all about that. You know, how many managers would ask their people or their teams, you know, what do you want in life? You know, often we think employees are here to work for us, for the business, you know, to help us get more customers and get more profits and earn more money, But how many employers or team managers or line managers or directors would be asking their employees, what do you want for your life, and how can I help you get that? Because imagine, like, what would it be
and mean it as well, not just say
it. And what would it be like what impact would it have on that person that someone gives a damn, you know? Go on, what are you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say, so it's so true. And I think that even sometimes there are people out there who will say that but don't actually mean it. It's part of their script. And you can tell the difference between the people who genuinely mean it and people who are just saying it for the sake of saying it.
100%, you know, and it has been very, I think it's been highlighted a lot with, at the moment, with the whole Black Lives Matter kind of stuff, isn't it? You know, where it's all coming to the forefront, like lots of organizations out there, or leaders, if you like, you know, I shared it today actually on somebody's post, that organizations create like BAME groups, for example, you know, to almost just tick a box to say that, oh yeah, look, we're being inclusive, you know, but actually, what's it really going to take for you to promote a manager who's a woman, or a Black person, or an older person, or a younger person? You know, what's it going to take?
Or in my case, an incredibly good-looking person, which can also be
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly that, right? Is what's it going to take? You know. So it's, you know, it's not just about ticking boxes. It's about really genuinely, authentically wanting to serve another human being. Like, I believe that when you're in a place of leadership where you know you people have people reporting into you, it's such a privilege. It's such a privilege that you can serve those people and make a difference to those people's lives. You know, I always remember seeing an older gentleman at Tesco. You know, he's in his like late 50s, early 60s, and he's dealing with arthritis in his knees and his hands, and he's, you know, working full time, filling, you know, heavy tins of beans on the shelf, and, you know, he's struggling to walk and pull the cages and stuff like that. You know, we missed a trick with him. Like, you know, we missed out on helping that gentleman see that, you know, life could be another way. You know, helping that gentleman see that, you know, you can have a dream to live your life in a different way. You know, when you're at school, you have your teachers that kind of guide you and, you know, help you progress your thinking and develop your thoughts and, you know, your visions and your dreams. When you go to college, you have tutors. Uni, you have your professors and, you know, your careers tutors or whatever, you know. And some people don't go to college and uni. Some people hate school. And then you go to work and you're just expected to be the full ticket. But as leaders, you know, who go through leadership training and coaching and mentoring and have access to personal development and leadership training and stuff like that, you know, we've got a real duty to serve humankind, to lead with love, to encourage another human being, or not even encourage, but involve another human being in living a life that they would dream to live.
Do you know, you said two things there, which kind of thing I think strike a chord with me, which is, oh, by the way, I'm just going to quickly say as well, for all the people watching out there as well, if you want to leave a question, I am checking on the comments as well, so you can ask Sue, because I had one immediate question, but which I'm just going to ask rhetorically for now, and I'll come back to later, which is about what someone can actively do if they're in a situation where they feel quite disempowered at work, through, you know, whatever the reason is, you know, whether you've got an oppressive manager or, you know, a team you don't bond with or whatever it might be. So we can kind of come to you and pose that question to you in a bit. But two things that you mentioned, which are quite important, is that, you know, as coaches, we see, or what we do, we can sometimes see the results of, and seeing people, you know, like you were talking about, reminiscing with someone who you've kind of, you know, helped change their life. And I think that's why people like you and myself do this kind of work, because we know the impact it can have. You know, I think coaching is still, you know, not 100% mainstream profession yet. It's not like people go to university to train as a coach yet, so that's not there, but it will be in the future. I know that will be for sure. But it's interesting as well. I do, when you were just talking there and you were talking about kind of the leader serving the people, I was reminded of one of my first ever office jobs I got to work in, and it was a call center, and it was selling these, you know, prepaid telephone cards and things like that. And I remember when I went through the training, the manager who was giving the training was really good, and he had a training lady with him as well. But I remember him showing this example where he like had a pyramid, and he goes, let's flip this around. He goes, I'm going to be, we're going to flip the pyramid around. I can't make the shape with my hand, but anyway, he goes, I as the manager will be at the bottom, serving you at the top, because you're the ones making the money for the company. And I think that's so important, and you don't get that level of leadership in many places. That for many people, seniority means, you know, you are the boss of people.
Yeah, and that people should serve you. Yeah,
exactly.
That. Yeah.
And, you know, I think that mentality is a fantastic mentality, but, you know, getting people to apply it and live it is the tricky thing. I mean, you know, it's not something you can force on people, that leadership mindset, rather than a managerial mindset. But, you know, where's a good place to start? You know, if you're someone and you want to be a better leader and lead with love, right? You know, where do they start? They do.
Well, the first place to start is with yourself, and really looking at who do you really want to be for your team, right? So I create, you know, whenever if I'm gonna, like, I've got a team of like 9 people, yeah. And I decided that who I'm going to be for this team is I'm going to be love, I'm going to be leadership, and I'm going to be success. Like, that's who I'm going to be for them, right? And I shared that with them, and I said, this is what I'm going to provide for you guys. This is who I'm going to be in every interaction that we have. This is who I'm going to be for you, right? And this is how it's going to look, right? And then I got everyone in the team to share who they're going to be for the team. But it's got to start over here. is, first of all, is who am I going to be for them? And then once you've kind of got who you're going to be for your team, is then you've got to look at how are you going to provide that for your team? How am I going to express love, leadership, and success to them? I've got to have a bit of a vision around, what does that look like, so that they know what we're aiming for. I'm going to start sharing with them, getting into their world and understanding who they are. So for me, leadership is very much, I talked about when we said earlier about that leader being about what you want. There's a term for it, it's called servant leadership, or I call it service leadership. And that's all about, as a leader, is asking yourself, is one, who do I want to be for my team? But then two is, how can I serve my team? Often as leaders, what we're thinking about is the task at hand, is what do we need to do, right? And then we start doing the thing, and rather than stopping to first be who we need to be, we end up just doing all the time. We as leaders, we have these things to do list constantly, and we're focused on the things to do list, but rather than focusing on just that and then leaving everyone else to try to just kind of catch up with you, or not even spending time with people, is you got to think about is, who do you actually need to be to get to your outcome, to have what it is that you want in your life. So there's a model that is called the be do have model. You've probably heard it. Often we operate from what we want to have, right? So in business, we want to have great profits, we want to have the results, we in life we want to have the car, the house, the promotion, the pay rise, all of that. So to have that, we think that because we want to have that, we're going to do things that are going to help us have that. And the things that we end up doing are working long hours, taking work home, being demanding of people, being really short and sharp with people, holding people to account all day long, not investing in our health, not investing in our relationships, all of that. Also that one day we could be happy, be content, be satisfied, be loving, be calm. And I always say to my clients here is actually, you've got to start with the being. Imagine if you were being that now, being calm, being satisfied, being loving, being supportive now, what would you do from that way of being? You do lots of different things, wouldn't you? You'd be listening more, you'd be supportive, you'd be helping people grow their skills so that they can then go and do the things that you would be doing, take it home with you. You'd be so much more nurturing and, delegating, supporting, developing. And then what you find is, rather than firefighting and working hard to get to the result, is actually a lot easier to get to the result, because you're going together as a team rather than you feeling like you have to do it all, and then it's impacting on your health and your relationships and, your situation and your mindset and your all of that, your well-being. So really think about who you need to be in anything that you want to achieve in your life. I wanted to have a six-pack, for example, so to have a six-pack, like I can't just keep doing the things that I'm doing and relentlessly, walking 15,000 steps and doing gym work like 24/7, 5 hours a day or whatever. I've got to really think about, who do I need to become first to, have the body that I want to have. So I've got to become someone who's a bit more consistent and disciplined and focused, and then create from there. Okay, what can I do realistically every day, and how long is it going to take? So have a real clear plan and do it so that it's not hard work. But yeah, it's really important that, as a line manager, one is you think about who you've got to be first for the outcome that you want to reach, and then consider how are you going to serve your team.
That's so true. And firstly, can I just say, of course, we all know you have a six-pack. We can see it clearly. I mean, we know that straight away. You don't have to brag about it. We know. What you were saying is so true. It reminded me, was giving me sort of callbacks to some things I've been reading and listening to recently, one of which is Simon Sinek. He talks a lot about the be, do, and have. And I was reading Atomic Habits recently, and he was talking about the same thing, that thinking about what is it you actually want to be. It's not that you want to make a habit to run every day. You want to be a runner, and that's where you need to operate from. And understanding that that's part of your identity, right? Do you want to be do you want to just be just a manager, just does the status quo, but doesn't actually lead from the front and just tells people what to do? Or do you want to be someone who actually, leads with true emotion, actually emotionally drives people by finding their why and, supporting their outcomes? And I think that
100%.
is so true, isn't it?
100%.
It's
Yeah.
so true.
100%. And through that journey as well of who I need to become is, do I just want to be someone with a six pack, or do I want to be someone who's disciplined, focused, and consistent? Because actually, by being someone who's disciplined, consistent, and focused has really helped me in so many other areas of my life. Like you mentioned Atomic Habits there, I read that book, and that's really helped me bring, I always thought about meditation and, doing meditation, and I kind of did it on and off, but couldn't really get into the habit of doing it. And one of the things that he talks about in the book is like how to reward yourself to create a habit. So I wouldn't reward myself with breakfast unless I've meditated, and creating these daily habits, has been transformational for me. So I meditate every single day, and I don't eat breakfast until I've done it. So, it's one thing like reading and, getting more information about the things that you need to do from the books and articles and TEDx talks and podcasts and stuff like that. But it's really looking at how can you really apply some of the stuff that you learn in your life. Is every book that I read, I think about one thing that I'm going to take away from it and actually apply it in my life. There's so many people, they call it shelf development, isn't it? They go on to courses and they learn stuff, and then they just literally put it on the shelf, and like they don't actually do anything with it. So for me, it's really important that continuous learning is learning, but is actually also implementing what you've learned.
It's so true, right? And we were talking about this just before we came on, right? That I my personal ethos is, if I'm going to coach someone on something, I have to have done it. Without that, for me, that, I know you talk about integrity quite a lot as well. For me, that integrity isn't there. I'm not going to coach someone on, building a 6-figure business if I haven't done it. I don't think that, for me, that's right, to even put that out there. But it's so true. I mean, like what you were just saying and everything, it's so true about, that style of leadership and taking that on board and kind of looking at who you really want to be. Because I think that is fundamentally the big question, right? Who is it you really want to be? And I've got another chain of thought which I'm going to introduce you to in a second as well. But while we're just quickly riffing, I'm just going to say hello to everyone that's joined as well, because it's lovely to have you on board, and because it's wonderful people are taking their time out to be on the live. If you have any questions for the lovely Sue, feel free to put them at her. But I just wanted to ask you something just out of curiosity, because again, while we were talking, just something came up as an old memory, and I got asked once, what's the difference between being a manager and a leader? So I want to ask you, what's the difference between being a manager and a leader? So
I think managers can be leaders too. I think, we do this in our leadership programs quite a bit as well. We like to help the people that we're kind of leading to at the time, really differentiate the difference. And, if you look at, you can Google it, right? Because we do get them to go and do that. Management is about managing the day-to-day tasks around, the everyday things that you need to happen, coordinating, managing the schedules, the rotas, the shift patterns, and making sure everybody's doing what they're doing. But a real leader, which can also be a manager too, is a bit more of a visionary around where does this team need to go, right? Is, really looking at it from an umbrella-like place of like, where does this team need to go? How can I take the team with me to where they need to go, rather than focusing on just the day-to-day stuff? So a manager can have kind of both hats on. And often, I was talking about this earlier, actually, sometimes line managers who are managing a team of people, they have the hardest job. They're trying to be a manager, a coach, a HR manager, a leader. They've got so much going on, and I'm just kind of comparing it to, the line managers at Tesco, for example. They're dealing with so much. It's often the toughest job, because you've got to deal with what the directors are telling you to do. You've got to deal with your staff. You've got to deal with the HR person. You've got to deal with the customers, and they're getting it from all angles. And it's really tough for a line manager to also be a leader, but the ones who have really mastered it, step into their leadership. And what they're creating here is not just managing and keeping the status quo of where we are. They're not just thinking about maintenance of the department or the team or where we are. They're actually thinking about how can we progress, how can we move this forward, how can we be better, bigger, how can we do more, be more, and have more. So they're very forward thinking, and they will be prepared to put themselves on the line in terms of really overcome some of the things that that they might not want to overcome, but they need to overcome to take the team and the company or the business and provide the service that they really want to provide for their customers. But yeah, they're really thinking on a visionary level around how can we really progress.
Yeah, I love that. And I think I remember someone put it nicely to me once, and they said, managers tend to leverage their logical skills more, whereas leaders tend to leverage their emotional skills more. Because like you said, right, it's about the leader being the visionary and carrying everyone else forward with that vision, or putting it in a way so that people understand or are on board with that idea and want to, are invested in that idea, right? Because there's nothing worse than when you've got a team who just don't really care that much. They just don't care about, what's going on. They're just there for their paycheck. And
the thing is around that as well, Amit, like when people don't care, it's not that they don't care, it's that they're not engaged. And often, that's down to how they're being led. So they're disengaged in the business, into the manager, in what they're contributing. And there's lots of things that a leader can do to re-enroll people, but really you've got to be willing to get into the world of people. A lot of managers are just operating at a very surface level with their teams, like they're just workers, or they're just cashiers, or just people who come here to do a job. And they're not just that. Often the cashier is a mother of 3 children, managing a budget, managing a peer, as in her husband, running the house, cooking the dinner, doing the ironing, cleaning the house, getting the groceries. Like they're leading a whole family into the next generation, or their vision. They're carrying the vision of the family. So when we look at our teams as just a cashier, or just a member of staff, or just an admin clerk, or just we're listening to them as small people. We're actually they're leaders in their own right. And when you listen to someone as a leader, there's so much more potential to enroll them into taking accountability and stepping into their leadership.
And leaders create leaders, right?
100%. Like, if you've got somebody in your team who is disengaged and is just here for, or you think is just there for the paycheck, then there's something that you need to look at in your leadership, for sure.
What specifically? Because I think that's a challenge, I think, for any leader, even the best of leaders, which is that, if you've got someone who at first glance maybe they're just for a paycheck, right? What can you actually, can you do anything in that situation? Is there anything possible that can be done?
The first thing you got to look at is who you're being as a leader. So when you take it back to who you're being as a leader, if you've got somebody who's disengaged, are you stepping into your leadership? Are you being in their world? Do you know what's really going on in their world? Do you know what they're dealing with in their lives? And why would anybody just want to come to work for a paycheck and not be happy? We had a line manager on this course that we were delivering a few months back, and he said, I've got this guy, right, in my team who's always late. Consistently late. And I said, okay, and have you spoken to him? He said, yeah. I said, what did you say? He said, I said to him that, you need to stop being late, and can you make sure that you come on time? I said, okay, so now what are you going to do? He said, now I'm going to have to sit him down and give him a disciplinary. I said, okay, have you spent an extra 2 minutes asking him why he's late? Because you don't know, he might be having to change his times picking up his child or dropping his child off. His parents might have become ill, so he's having to go and see them in the morning. Like, there could be lots of reasons. He's maybe, something to do with like traveling or whatever that is. Like, really taking some time out to understand what's really going on in his world, and then decide whether you need to give him a disciplinary or not. But often what we see is that they come in late, We've mentioned to them that they need to be on time. So we think we've done our job, right? And then now they're disrespecting it because we've had a word with them about being late. So now I'm going to have to give them a warning. But actually, a warning is not going to help you create loyalty with your team. Yeah, it's really understanding what is that person really dealing with in their life, that's creating them to be late, because nobody wants to be out of integrity. Nobody wants to really be late for the sake of just being late. Like, why would you want to do that? Like if you when you've got loyalty, like you think about it, when you've worked for a manager and you've really looked up to them, you love the way they lead and stuff like that, would you want to do that? You wouldn't. You would want to do everything you can to make sure that your manager succeeds, the team succeeds, and you're a contribution to that team and that manager. There's always, when that happens, there's always something to look at over here. It's very really over there with them. And as a leader, like you're like you've got access to leadership skills and training and mentoring and personal development and stuff like that. You've got to look at really employing that and those skills to how you lead people. Often we lead people thinking they should be the same as me. I get in early, I work hard, I work long hours, I get in early, work late, and I'm so committed, I don't have a lunch break. And we expect everyone to be on the same level. Well, if everyone was on the same level, there'll be no need for managers. We'd all be doing it.
It's so true. I think that's a really good point about what you said, which is about the leader looking to themselves first. Who are they being, right?
100%.
Who are they being? And I think that's really true. But just being a slightly devil's advocate, right? You're a leader and you've got a situation where you've got, an employee that, like you said, right, maybe they're not turning up on time, but maybe that's just because they're quite apathetic to the job and they are genuinely there just because they can get they're getting paid for it, and that's what they want. Of course, in their head, they're thinking, until something better comes along, I'll just do this. What can a leader do in that situation? What can they do with something like that?
So I think if somebody's in that situation, there's been like a breakdown of trust, a breakdown of respect in that relationship by now. If somebody's in that space, where they're just there for the sake of being there. And in that situation, a leader needs to have an honest conversation with that employee and say, look, I think, perhaps maybe like, what we're at, you've always got to take it back to, and I said it earlier, like I've got this model that I use around performance. Is when the accountability for performance is with the manager over here, you've lost the game. Performance is the accountability of every individual in the organization. So your performance is your accountability. My performance is my accountability. And as leaders, we kind of take it on that actually it's my responsibility to manage you. And when we do that, we've lost all power. So for me, it will be, if that employee's got objectives and goals and, you've done everything that you can to support them and all of that kind of stuff, it's now kind of asking them and saying, look, have you delivered what you say you were going to deliver? And the answer is going to be no. Okay, well, how come? It's always, putting the question's always, the ball's always got to be in their court about their performance. And when you do it, like when you create that kind of culture, it makes your manager's job so much easier, because you're not having to do all the hard work of having awkward conversations. All you're doing is saying, well, you said you were going to do this by this date, and now you've not done it. So what are you going to do? And then leave it up to them. And then when you do that, like they will either talk themselves out of the job and realize that their values are not aligned to the business or the team, and they will go and find their happiness somewhere else.
It's actually, I'm glad you ended on that note, because I think, and the reason I was playing devil's advocate there, because I think I was in the same boat, and being in that situation where I'm the employee and I'm struggling, and I often think to myself, what would I have done in that situation if I was the leader? And I think you kind of said it there in the end, which was that if I was in that boat, I would probably say to that person, okay, what is it you want to do? And let me help you get there. Because there's no point in you being here, and it's not a resentful statement, but there's no point in you being there if you're not enjoying what you're doing. So let me help you then get to where you want to be. And I think leaders can take a big lesson from that and just saying, right, okay, what can I do to help someone with their career? Because I think there's a lot of leaders out there who'll say that as an intellectual statement, but they don't really mean it. And I think meaning it and helping people and understanding, look, your people are not going to be around forever. They're going to grow, they're going to develop, they're going to want to go into their own leadership positions, they're going to want to they're going to evolve as human beings as they get older, find what their passions are, what drives them, etc. And so genuinely supporting people on that trajectory, that's a big word for this time of day, it's a massive thing. And I think that if I was in that situation now and I was with an employee that was in that situation, that was the one thing I would say to them. So what can I do to help you get to the job that you truly want, where you actually enjoy turning up every day, where you enjoy doing what you're doing?
100%. When you look at sports teams, they've got like their coach or their captain who really create team. Like they cannot operate as a sports team without each other. And it's the same in business, in work, is how do we, it's all very emotive, when we're talking about leading with love, it's generating those, good emotions in the workplace, not just directly with employees, but creating that amongst their peers so that, when times get hard, that they've all got each other's back. And in business, because we're so focused on doing tasks, we don't make enough time to nurture those relationships. And we nurture those relationships through conversation and making time for people and getting into their world. Like, what are they really dealing with? Like in my team, I know exactly what they're dealing with. I know what their challenges are. I know what's important to them. I know what their values are. I connect with them on a one-to-one very regularly to kind of say, right, how's things going? I know, their children's names, their parents' names, like all of that, their dogs' names or whatever, like really getting into the world of what it's like to be in their shoes. And it just makes the world of work such a nicer place to be, and we get the result as well. Like my team have really got my back. They have got my back, and I really love them to bits because of who they are for me. I kind of approached them and said, look, I've got this new opportunity come along, but I can't do that. Not that I can't do that, but I want to do it. But I want to, also want to be here for you guys. And they've all said, you know what, Sue, we want to create an environment and a space where we will hold the fort here while you go and do something, while you go and do that other thing. So you don't ever have to worry about what we've got here, and we're going to hold this space for you. Like, it's so awesome.
Yeah, that's true. That's a beautiful thing. I was going to say, by the way, just for anyone watching right now, if you want to connect with Sue, just so we know quickly, and I was going to lead on to something else there, but what's the best way people can get in touch with you? LinkedIn, Instagram? What's the best way to?
LinkedIn is the best way. I'm very active on LinkedIn. On Facebook, it's more of my personal journey on Facebook, but predominantly in terms of my work, I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah,
I'm glad you said that, actually, because you posted a really nice sort of sort of mini article on LinkedIn today, and you were talking about when you're in a situation when you're confronted by colleagues or even superiors, and this whole. In fact, let me let you articulate it as well, because it was a beautiful sentiment that you made today, and I think again it's quite an important thing to mention now, flipping it over from to the other side, the person in question, when you're in that situation, what you can do.
So basically, like over time, I've grown up lacking in confidence, right? Not being very shy, being very scared of doing things wrong, and just really not holding myself, being in my power. And often while I was developing this level of confidence or assertiveness or whatever, I've had people share with me saying, you got to stand your ground, you got to fight back, and don't let people walk all over you, and don't take crap from people and all that kind of stuff. And I made it mean that if somebody was being overpowering or was being quite demanding, or humiliating or whatever, bullying behaviors and stuff like that, that I needed to retaliate, and I needed to put my foot down and almost become like them, you know. And in the few instances that I've done that, it's never really felt like who I really am. So what I've learned over time is that actually when people are like that is, you know, you just got to kind of get that they're dealing with their own stuff, and that's their only way of being right now. Because if they could be any other way, they would be, right? It's really just accepting them for however they are. And what I've also learned is that I don't need to retaliate anymore. Often in the past, I used to retaliate because then it looked good, because then people would see like, I'm a tough girl, you know, like, check me out, you know, I got some kick-ass feistiness in me. But I didn't feel great being that way. And now I find that, you know, I don't have to prove myself to anybody. I don't need to make someone else look and feel wrong for the decisions they've made or how they've come across. That actually I can have a conversation with them afterwards and have them feeling really empowered, as well as empowering myself to, you know, come to you know, come to a kind of an agreement, or, you know, a new way of being, to create a new possibility between us in our relationship. So you know, I don't ever feel the need now to retaliate or fight back and stuff. Sometimes it's just easier just to not say anything in the moment and be okay with it. I don't need to have this thing where I need to look bigger than them or stronger than them or better than them or right. I don't need to be right anymore, you know. I just need to be me. And, you know, knowing who I am is enough for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I thought it was such a nice message, because it's so easy in those situations to react. But just taking that moment just to, before you do it, have a think about it, right? Who am I being? Who do I want to be, right, in this situation?
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah.
to react and get into that situation, and but then to get out of it afterwards, it's quite hard. If as soon as you've pulled the trigger on that reaction, then you know, then you're just going to end up in a not a very nice situation, basically.
Yeah, and who do you end up being? Just like them.
Exactly, right. Exactly.
You know, and you're not being true to who you are. So if you're being true to who you are, like, you know, it does take skill though. Like, it's taken a lot of practice to get in that space, because I think somebody commented on my post saying it's really you know, it's not always easy to maintain that as human beings. You know, there'll be times when you're fight or flight and you're just going to revert back to, you know, retaliating and fighting, and, you know, so it does take something of you to, when you're in the moment, to really be, you know, like a consciousness or an awareness that you're almost getting sucked into an argument, and don't get sucked in. Don't get sucked in, because yeah, it's hard, because once you're there, you start creating a listening, you know, that person will start listening to you as someone who does retaliate, who, you know, who isn't really authentic. And you know, for me, I'm really, you know, I've been really working on being true to who I am, and that's just who I've got to be every day, and just be in integrity with that.
Yeah, digressing slightly, right? This conversation reminds me a little bit about a meme, not necessarily a meme, but I think it's Serena Williams who talks about this, and I've got to admit I'm not a fan of her attitude, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but you know, she was talking about, you know, like if you see an aggressive man in a workplace, you know, he's being assertive, but if you see an aggressive woman, she's being bitchy or something. And I completely disagree with that, because I'm sorry, I call a spade a spade. If I see an aggressive guy, he's being an aggressive guy. If I see an aggressive woman, she's being an aggressive woman. I don't think that any of those are excuses for aggressive behavior or any of that type of negative behavior. And I think it all comes down to who we are as individuals and how we carry ourselves and the way that we are with people. And like, you know, for me, if I'm, you know, look, we all have our own individual challenges, right? And, you know, I say this to a couple of friends of mine who are really close friends. They're the only ones who can really push my buttons. You know, yeah. I'm quite a calm person in most circumstances now. You know, I've learned to master myself to that level, but it's my close friends who push my buttons the most. But in those situations, I think that, you know, there isn't any excuse for that kind of behavior. That there is another way. I don't care who you are, man, woman, transgender, black, white. Don't throw those labels at me. And it's about something like that, because it's got nothing to do with that. It's about you as a human soul behaving in a way that is not conducive to getting a nice, beautiful reaction out of the people you're with. And for me, that's just so fundamentally important. But yeah, anyway, sorry, I digress slightly, but I just...
No, and I think you're making a really valid point. I think it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman or a transgender or black or white or, old or young or, whatever. I think if you're being your true self, that's all that really matters, is just be you. You don't, when you're being aggressive, again, there's an underlying insecurity there that you feel you have to be aggressive, because naturally as a human being, that's not who we are. Fundamentally as a human being, we are all about love and connection. So if we're being anything other than that, there's an insecurity or an underlying something going on there that needs to be looked at for that individual person. So yeah, I don't agree with that at all. I'm an Asian woman, been a leader in many different situations, and I've never had to be aggressive with people to prove a point or to be a certain way or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. So just quickly hi to everyone watching as well. So if you just joined, we are sort of approaching the end, but you're listening to my lovely guest there, Su Patel, who's written a book and authored a book called Putting the Human Back in HR, and overall cool chica. She's just a wonderful human being and soul as well. So I thought let's
thank you. Hi everyone.
Let's get her on the podcast. So listen, another sort of side note for you as well. So based on everything that you've done, everything that you're doing, everything you want to do, what's the legacy you want to leave on planet Earth? What is the true legacy of your work you want to leave behind? Like when people think about Su Patel, what do you want them to associate with that name?
Yeah, do you know what? I do think about this quite a lot, because when I was a young manager, one of the first books that I read was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits is begin with the end in mind. And I'm always thinking about, like, when I leave this place, when I move on, what's the legacy that I want to leave behind, and I always kind of think, like, I want to be remembered for how I made people feel. And there's a saying, isn't there, like, is people won't remember you for what you did and what you had, but they'll remember you for how you made them feel. And I want to be remembered as, genuinely being what I say I am, which is, a leader, empowerment, and love. Like, that's who I really am, right? And I want to be remembered as being someone who always loved, who always empowered, and who always had great leadership of, just taking people where they want to go and just listening to people's greatness.
Yeah, that reminds me of a video. I think you may have missed it, but I posted this on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and it was about a gentleman by the name of Jim Quick, who's an incredible human being himself, and has written a book called Limitless. And he was in the book, he talks about one of his stories about Will Smith, and he was with Will Smith and doing some work with him. And he asked Will Smith, he said, well, what's your sponsoring question in life? And Will Smith answered, he said, how can I make this moment amazing? And obviously that just blew him away, but he goes, okay, so how can you make that even better? And can you make it even better? And Will Smith sort of thought for a moment and thought, well, I can improve upon it. Actually, I'm going to start asking, how can I make this moment even more incredible? It's because he's driven by the way he makes people feel, and that's why I kind of think of what you were saying as well. And I think that I'm driven by that a lot as well, is that how am I making people feel in the moment, and this is why I'm a bit of a joker and a bit of an entertainer, that essence of me will never disappear. That'll always be there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a beautiful answer. I think that's a great legacy to leave behind, and I think that that's definitely going to happen for you. And
Thank you. And just to share a little story around that, I've shared this before in a video. Like, my dad and I didn't have a great relationship for many years. Like, my dad ended up leaving when I was about 14, and he then kind of went to live his life, and didn't really stay in touch with any of us, and we were kind of like left with our mom to kind of get on with life and grow up and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember over the years, I really made my dad wrong you know, like, what kind of a dad is he? He doesn't care, he doesn't do this, he doesn't do that, you know, why would he not want to know how his kids are and not be around, and all that made him really, really wrong. And I was like, my dad's dead to me and all that kind of stuff. But one thing that I realized, like, I went and, you know, went on this personal development program with Landmark, and, you know, like, I was like in the moment, and I really saw for myself that actually, do you know what? It doesn't matter who my dad is for me, it's who do I want to be for my dad. And I called him up after all that time, you know, I think it must have been about 15, 16 years or whatever it was. And, you know, I apologized to him for not being in his world and not being around with, you know, for him and stuff like that. And all he said was, you know what, it doesn't matter. He said, how's my granddaughter?
Oh.
You know, and that year was the first time, like, my dad had all of us kids, you know, obviously he's got another 2 kids in his new relationship, and, you know, the grandkids and, you know, the family around for dinner on his birthday. And I got to create that from my, you know, from my new way of being with my dad. And now I kind of apply that in everything that I do. Actually, I don't think about what other people and organizations can do for me. It's, you know, I really think about, actually, who can I be for them? You know, and I was just sharing with somebody this morning that, you know, when you're walking in the street, or you're going for walks, and or you're running and stuff, and you're seeing people who don't necessarily make eye contact with you, but the minute you look at them and you say hello, you don't know what they're dealing with, you don't know what thoughts they're having, but the fact that you interrupted their thoughts could have made their day, or could have changed their mind about something that they were going into a negative thought or pattern around or whatever. So always think about, you know, it's not about them saying hello first, it's about you being and showing up as a leader for people.
Do you know, if you were to ask Niyati, my wife, you know, about that, because she loves it really, but she makes a bit of a joke that I kind of like stop to talk to people, especially dog owners, but people in general. I would just say hello to people. I'll just try and get their eye contact and just say hello to them. You know, like on morning walks, we're out very early in the morning, and I absolutely love it. And I like that. You know, it's creating a nice community atmosphere where we live, and you know, you start to see the similar faces every day, and it's nice to say hello to them. There's one guy who runs past every day, and I always say hello to him. And there's another guy who walks 2 dogs. There's another elderly couple who walk their dog. There's another lady we met the other day who again walks her dog, and I said hello to her. And then I met another lady who walks her 2 dogs, and she got a new dog, and the other dog's getting a bit grumpy, but we made friends with her anyway. And the little loves me. And then it turns out she also knows a dog owner who I used to know many years ago, and then we bumped into the other day as well. And I absolutely love it. And you know, just having a community, and
amazing.
Yeah, and it's just it's been a great experience. And I just wanted to say as well, the last thing you mentioned about that's such a beautiful thing, what you mentioned about your dad, because, you know, even when you see Hollywood films, you always see it, you know, like, oh, my parents were never there. My dad was never there for me, man. My mom was never there for me, right? But, you know, what you're saying there is so beautiful. You know, how can I be there for them? We always have to assume that it's about the parent being there for you. What about you being there for them?
And we create that, you know what, that our parents are like these people who have got it all together, but they're just human beings like you and me are. They're also dealing with their insecurities and their limiting beliefs. And, you know, we look up to our parents as if they've got it all together and figured out, but they didn't come with you know, they didn't get a manual on parenting. And they're also dealing with their insecurities and their limiting beliefs that were passed on from their parents and all of that. And actually, how long, you know, for me, when I was thinking about it, is how long am I going to torment my mom and dad for how my life turned out? It's not their fault that my life turned out the way it did. You know, I became this angry, judgmental, gossiping young lady, right? It's not their fault. You know, they did the best they could with what they had. You know, and now it's for me to look at is it doesn't matter who they are and what they are and what they did and didn't do, is who do I choose to be now? You know, and it's
you nailed it, sister. Who do I choose to be now?
Yeah. And you can choose in any moment who you want to be.
Love it. I love it. Absolutely. And that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I think that on that note, we'll end there, because that's quite a powerful statement to let people ponder on, right? Who are you choosing to be in that moment? And that's a beautiful.
Oh, amazing.
What a way to end. Wow. Virtual high fives.
All right. It's been really beautiful, Amit. Thank you for just creating this space.
I love that. I loved every second of this today as well. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for being on, and for those who've just joined or those who are watching and you want to watch back or listen back, it's going to be on all the podcast platforms in the next few hours. I will add all the links. I will share Sue's link so you can connect with her as well. But I just want to say it's been an absolute pleasure to everyone who's been listening in or watched. Thank you for joining us on the Feel Inspired podcast, episode 14 with the lovely Su Patel. Really nice.
Thank you.
Round of applause. And I'm going to be back on Friday with another lovely guest called Smita Joshi. So I'm looking forward to that on Friday. And then I've got 2 more guests lined up for next week. So it's going to be a fun podcast full couple of weeks, which I'm really looking forward to. And we just had someone say good morning from Japan as well. Hello.
Wow. Hi, Japan.
So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me, and I will stay on with me while I end the live. But to everyone watching, have a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday evening, and we'll see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.